Google Stadia is supposed to make gaming easier and more accessible for people without powerful computers at home, done by leveraging remote servers to process the games and then send a video downstream for decoding. It's not a new idea, but Google's execution of this old idea proves that it's possible to fail in even more spectacular ways than previously thought. Google's old motto used to be, "Don't be evil." But to be fair to Google, they never had any rules about not being incompetent. Today we'll talk about Google Stadia's inept launch that has left many of its buyers, including us, without services that were promised in exchange for the higher price tag. Before that, this video is brought to you by the MSI X570 Unify motherboard, a high-end option for Ryzen 3000 builds. The MSI X570 Unify is a good fit for 3900X and 3950X CPUs and is built with a blackout theme and gets rid of all the RGB LED fuss. Instead, the X570 Unify focuses on VRM performance, build quality, and good overclocking support. If you're looking for a high-end, all-black board for Ryzen 3000 builds, check the link in the description below. Stadia is supposed to be a game streaming service. This has been done before, it's been attempted before, and not many people have had any measure of success at all. NVIDIA's probably been about the closest with GeForce Now, which was previously called Grid. But Stadia is the new attempt at this, and it's done by one of the biggest companies in the world, and probably the company that has the most internet infrastructure, period, at its disposal. So if anyone can make it work today, then Google theoretically is going to be that company. This is supposed to allow you to play games in Google Chrome, like in a web browser. You should be able to play games via Chromecast, like one of these that they'll ship with the expensive Founders Package, or you can buy separately if you like wasting your money. And also should be able to stream to phones, although we had no interest in testing that today. It is on the supported features list. Our goals for today, at the outset, were to simply test latency, input latency, and do some basic benchmarks of playing games that we already have on PC and on consoles in a web browser using Google Stadia. That was the plan. It didn't materialize, but that was the plan. We had good intentions. Google mostly lied for this launch. It doesn't really have any excuses for some of the things that aren't working, because Google ostensibly owns basically all of the services that are remotely attached to Stadia. Google makes Gmail and G Suite, which we'll talk about momentarily, and also Android, if you'd forgotten that, and also the Pixel phones, which we'll talk about later too. So the company has all but mandated use of its other services to even begin to use Stadia, which is annoying in the least. But we were willing to deal with it because we just wanted to test the gaming side of things. So our out-of-box experience, unfortunately, we were graced with an experience where it was just not possible to get the product working. So what you are getting from us today is a genuine consumer-level review of the product, because we didn't get on the review list for this. We didn't ask either, to be fair. But not being on the review list is interesting because it forces us to buy it and then on launch day, test it the way everyone else would when they get it in the box. And so you get the real experience walkthrough with us, or at least the real experience for minimally hundreds of users if the internet is anything to go by. Google Stadia had a founders pack that we obviously advised against back when it was announced, with some of the value being an early registration of unique usernames without numbers appended to the end. Although this isn't actually much value aside for business uses, like for streamers who need to register their names and that's important for them, Google still casts its net to catch early adopters. The arrogance of Google to bait buyers with the promise of first crack at a username, something that is artificially segmented by releasing the poor people version of Google Stadia next year instead of now, is only further exemplified by its responses to online criticism. The Stadia official Reddit account replied to criticisms with the following quote, "It's a unique time in history when you have a chance to grab a cool name on a new gaming platform." And just to really emphasize that, they said, it's a unique time in history for a gaming platform special name. That's what Google was defending their pre-order option of a unique name in order to try and justify the $130 price tag. Some say that rescuers are still looking for Google's head up its own asshole after that quote. It's way up there. It'll take them a while to find it. So let's get a few things straight. First of all, that's not a unique time in history. That's a very large stretch of those words. A unique time in history would be the rise of agrarian society or maybe the fall of Rome. Those are unique times in history. Google did, to its credit, appropriate a Latin name though, so we'll give them that. But Stadia isn't a unique time. Stadia is also another commodity for entertainment, just like all of the others. Basically everything we review, it's all pretty much commodities, which is fine, but it's certainly not special. And like every single other consumer electronic that has ever and probably will ever be invented, it will be forgotten within the next decade along with all of its lineage, unless it's one of the very few extremely successful products like perhaps Mac OS or Windows. Say what you will about them otherwise, but they've lasted. So Google carried on in its message saying the following: good reason to pre-order for this, but heads up, Andre is taken. You'll get the name reservation email a bit before you receive your Founders Edition. As for who gets first dibs, we'll be sending name reservation emails in the order pre-orders were received. And this is where the real part of our review starts. We never got that email, and in looking around online, that appears to be the status quo. It seems like these emails, which are required to turn on the $130 Google Stadia purchase, have not really been going out. But we have other problems aside from that too. And that's the general setup, which even if you got the activation code email, you still would likely have issues with, in the very least at a philosophical level, if not a technical level. So in order to get a head start on Stadia testing, we did pre-order the $130 Founders Edition. We do that because it's our job to make videos about these things, so it makes sense for us to get it in early, opportunity cost, all that stuff. But we wouldn't recommend pre-ordering in general. This comes with a Chromecast Ultra, shown here. It also comes with access to the Stadia streaming service starting today, and that'd be November 19th, time of filming. And it also comes with the Google Stadia controller. That's what you get with the pre-order, and the reviewers on Google's list, not us, got access earlier, and customers who just want to use the free base level won't have access until next year. Free, as in you still have to buy the games. So it's not really free. It's literally the opposite of free, but that's a topic for another video. We were lucky enough to get a box with our Founders hardware and the extra controller on launch day, which we paid for all of that stuff. Google stopped selling packages that guaranteed delivery on November 19th some time ago, and it seems like even some of the later Founders orders might not be shipped on time, although we did get ours. Considering ourselves fortunate to have gotten everything on time for the 12 p.m. EST launch, we started setting everything up. The Google Stadia launch page directed us to download the Stadia app on an Android or iOS device to begin setup and enter our code. Even though we were already logged into Chrome, the third Google product named in the last couple sentences, with the account we'd used to purchase Stadia, we still needed to set this up through a separate app on a separate device. As a reminder, we literally only need this app to enable our product that arrived in a physical box because we can't use them without registering them via an app, even though we're using a computer. Patrick tried to download the application on his Galaxy S4, but it's incompatible. It's an old phone, so sure, whatever. But again, we only need to activate it. And next, I tried to activate it download the app on my newer Android phone, also incompatible. Google requires one of its own phones, a Pixel phone running its Android OS, to activate Stadia via the requisite Stadia app, even if you're not going to stream to the phone. Our next step was to try and work around this, and we did that by unpacking the Chromecast Ultra that came with our Stadia Founders Edition bundle to see if we could run the Stadia app on that instead. In order to set up the Chromecast, we first had to install the Google Home app on a phone because we all died in a car crash, and this is actually hell. None of us own Chromecast, so we were expecting it to be normal Android streaming device type of product with some apps installed on it, but that's not the case. The $70 Chromecast Ultra is just a glorified HDMI cable that streams from other devices, and therefore can't actually run the Stadia app internally. Coincidentally, the oldest phone in the office, the S4, can output HDMI with a $10 adapter, while Google's newer phones can't because Google needs to sell more Chromecasts. Finally, one of our editors came in. Andrew's Pixel 2 is the only phone in the office compatible with the Stadia app. We already knew that Pixel phones would be the only ones compatible at launch. We just didn't know that we'd need to download the Stadia app to a phone to enter a code so that we could get permission from Mr. Google to play in a web browser on a desktop. It seems a little bit convoluted that way. We never intended to use the phone at all. We hate phones. We also don't really like Chromecast now. Here's the next problem. This is all just kind of building on the big mess that Google created for itself. If anyone remembers Google+, they stand by their services for a long time. So Andrew added our @gamersnexus.net G Suite address that we made for this purpose. And G Suite is another Google product. It's more or less a reskinned Gmail with your company's domain at the end of it. So this was added to his phone, which is compatible. We downloaded Stadia to it successfully. We needed to activate the code, but first the Stadia app told us that we can't use email accounts from G Suite, which is a Google product, because it needs us to use a generic Gmail account. So we made a generic Gmail account, added that to his phone. Andrew now has 6 Gmail accounts attached to his phone. Sorry, Andrew. And finally got to the code entry screen, which brings us mostly up to date. We stopped there. Google claimed that it would send out these Stadia codes when the Founders Edition packages were shipped. Google claimed a lot of things with this, and it's mostly dropped the ball. It's just sad that this is even an issue, because it's a matter of specifically selling early access to people. We don't really care. We didn't even want the thing other than to test it, see if it's any good, see how the latency is, see how the graphics quality is, stuff like that. All purely from an analytical, doing our jobs perspective. We wanted to work on it, but had no real personal interest to bring it home and use Stadia. We all have decent computers for that. So the real problem is that Google sold this expensive service and then provided none of the services attached to it, at least in, well, we'll talk about the input issues later, but at least in a fashion which people could actually access on launch day. Separately, this is a problem where Google's overcomplicating things, because all they needed to do was put the activation code in the box that the stuff came in, so that you can type it in, I don't know, Google Chrome, which is also owned by Google, and then play the games through Chrome as part of the advertised service would lead you to believe is possible. But that's not how it works, because Google's trying to link all their devices as much as they can to create an ecosystem that no one wants to be a part of. So clearly the package shipped and we got that. It's sitting here in the office, but neither we nor hundreds of angry customers online, and if you scroll through the /r/Stadia subreddit, you'll see the extent of the issue. None of us have gotten our codes, and therefore all of this hardware is useless. We tried plugging a controller into a PC, and it didn't even work as a gamepad out of the box, even though that's up to Steam. It's still added to the general aura of failure, though. So problems then. We are going to revisit this once it works, but the number one thing is don't bother buying this right now. The number two thing is there's absolutely no reason that Stadia users, which Stadia may be a good product, we don't really know, there's no reason that Stadia users should need a Pixel phone or even a Chromecast just to get this thing working. It's just need a website, that's it. That's all it needs. And additionally, the controller assembly is among the worst we've ever seen. The disassembly is a nightmare. You'll need to check our separate video for that. Google is doing its best to make sure that people can't maintain their devices, and we'll have another video on that. Google's letter they sent us with the package says the promise of creating one place for all the ways we play is a long-held dream. Today we are proud to see that dream becoming a reality. And then they say, a community of players is the core of Stadia. Thank you for being the first to gather round. Nope, didn't work. Literally none of it worked as promised. So that'll be it for this one. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net to help us out directly, or you can go to patreon.com/gamersnexus for behind-the-scenes videos. And also check back for our proper review of Stadia if it ever starts working. We'll see you all next time.